Hi, today we're going to go over how to mask out areas of a Godot tile map based on what the player can see while still enabling lighting. So what we're starting with is just a basic game with the tile map base. You have just a player that can move around, camera to follow the player. This canvas modulator, all that does is darken it so that the lights show up better. We just have a couple of torches which just have point lights. They have shadows enabled. They're just a simple gradient texture. We did have to set up light occluders on each of these on the wall tiles. So if you go into each one of those, you'll see tile set. Pick one of the tiles. You can see under the rendering there's occlusion layers. I did set it up so you can see a little bit of the walls on each of the tiles so that I think it looks better to be able to see a little bit of the wall. So now if I go back to the tile map, the first thing we need to do is set up a way to mask the view for the tile map. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're actually going to duplicate this tile map and hide the first one. This is going to be the visibility map. And what we're going to do here is we're going to actually set up a new material. We're going to do a new shader material. And this new shader material is going to set the entire map to white. So all the colors on the map are going to be white. And this shader is a very simple one. It's just setting color to 1111. And what this, the way this looks now, this is how it is lit up. What we're gonna do is we're actually gonna hide all the current lights and turn off the canvas modulate. We're gonna put those back for the lighting. This is just gonna show how we're gonna display the character's view. So we're gonna actually add a new light. I can type a point light 2D. This point light is going to have a new gradient texture 2D. And go in here, pick the gradient, flip this around. Wait, actually. We're going to do this new gradient. We're going to switch it to a constant gradient, so it's just white or black. The fill is going to be radial, and we need it to start from halfway through. So we're going to have the light from the middle of this texture. So then I'm going to shrink it so that it fits within the texture. I'm going to increase the size of it just so it's clearer. I'll just use about 256. There we go. So what this does is it just has a, let's see, we need to switch this around so that it goes from, there we go. So we got a nice sharp texture. I'm going to go ahead and actually move this. Actually, it needs to be on the top over here. I'm going to move this to sit where the player is because we're going to get it to update programmatically in a minute. And the important bit on this is we're going to switch the blend mode to subtract. So now what we have, let me turn off the point light for the player too. Now what we have is we've got a nice visibility view. And if we turn shadows on, you'll notice everywhere there's a wall, we get a blank spot. So we have this black area where we can see and the white where we can't. So all of this is going to be our visibility map. We're actually going to set up a new sub-viewport. And this sub-viewport will be our, where did it go? There it is, sorry. This sub-viewport will be our, what this sub-viewport will do is it'll allow us to generate a texture with this image that's the exact same size as the regular map, but it has this visibility date on it. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy both of these over into this visibility layer. There we go, and I can go ahead and turn the rest of the torch and the lights and everything back on for the main layer. And then this visibility layer, let's see, the visibility layer, We will also need to set up another couple options. We'll need to turn transparent background on. We'll also need to set the size of the viewport to the same size as the main viewport. And this one caught me a little bit. We need to update the render target update mode to always. So this will mean that it'll always update. It'll update this every frame. So what we can actually go ahead and do now as a debug tool is I'm going to go ahead and add a sprite to the map. And on this sprite, I'm going to add a new viewport texture. And this viewport texture will be the visibility viewport. Let's see, and where is the... Then I'm going to go ahead and scale this down to 0.1.1. You'll notice there, you can see the visibility there. And to have this show up without worrying about the lighting or anything like that, I'm going to set up a new canvas material and just set light mode to unshaded. So all this does is it lets it show up fully on there. All right, so if we go ahead and start the game now, you'll notice that you see the visibility viewport here. It's not changing right now because we haven't linked that viewport light to the player yet. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to set up a player script. I already got one set up. What I did was I have a node 2D that's just a linked position node. And then on process, we set the linked position node to the player's position pretty much just every frame. So what we'll go and do is we'll go back to the scene, and on the player, I'm going to go ahead and just assign the linked player node to the point light 2D that's in the visibility viewport. So if I play the game again, you'll notice this. You'll notice the viewport up here changes as the player moves around, and this is essentially just linking the player to the visibility. That's done there. So the next step is we're actually going to move this entire viewport into another, we're going to need to move this entire map into another viewport. The reason we have to do this is because we're going to run a shader on the tile map. And by default, when you have a shader on a tile map, the UV coordinates you get are purely for the individual tile within the tile map. So the UV coordinates for this would be from here to here for this one tile. I can actually show a good example of that if I go ahead and set a new shader material on here. Set up a new shader. And I'll just create a blank shader here. And what this will do is I will say color equals UV vec4 uv.x uv.y 1 1. And what this will do is you notice each of these tiles has a separate, it basically splits it up into grids. Because these are all the same, they sort of blend together pretty well. But you can see these bands, that's essentially just, each tile has its own UV map. That's, or UV, set of UV coordinates. That's basically what all I was getting at there. So I'll go ahead and just reset that material. And then we can set up a new viewport for the, we can set up a new viewport for the map, the lit map itself. I'm just going to go and rename this lit view. And this will just have the map, all the lights, and the canvas modulator, which does the actual lighting. So at this point, we would just have the player. So what we're going to do to see that is I want to set up one more sprite. This sprite will be the view sprite. And this, we're actually going to have to set this lit view layer up the same way we did the other one. So it's going to have be 800 pixels wide, 800 pixels tall. I set the game up to be square earlier. Turn transparency on, turn render target update to always. So you can see here it has the same sort of lit view. So this sprite, let's see, so lit view, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this. And this is going to be I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this debug view. And this is going to be a lit debug view. And then we're going to switch this texture out to be unique for this. Change the texture, and the viewport for this one is going to be the lit view. And then let's see, that did not change. Why did that not change? All right, and then if I play the game, okay, you can see the lit view over on the side as well. All right, so now we've got this new lit view sprite, which is currently empty. I'm going to go ahead and add a new viewport texture linked to the lit view. And this will, that should display at this point. Transform, position, scale. Let's see if it's just the editor. No, it's not the editor. Why is that not showing up? And then we're going to go ahead and switch the transform on this. Offset, we're going to turn centered off. So it's basically the same coordinates as the map itself, or as the screen itself. And so now you see we have essentially what we had before, where we can move the player around. And then we're actually going to also need to move the player into this lit view so that it can collide with the tiles in the map. So now if we go into the... Alright, I went ahead and moved the player to the lit view so that it can collide with the map properly. And then we need to modify the script here so that the camera update happens at the same time, so happens with the lit view player. So now if I play the game again, we should have a similar game to what we had before, except the order is wrong. So I'll put the player there. There we go. So now we have the same thing we had before, where we can move the player around, collides with the walls, everything like that. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to set up the masking of the lit view based on the visibility viewport view. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to this lit view sprite, which just displays the lit view for right now. I'm going to add a new shader material, because the shader is going to allow us to modify each pixel as it goes through. And I've actually got the shader already pulled up. This is the mask texture shader. Open. And then this takes a couple parameters. I'll go over this shader in just a second. We're going to go ahead and set the mask texture to a new, where is it? Viewport texture. Sorry, this is a problem that may come up. I need to make sure to set this shader as local to scene so that we can so that we can use the viewport texture. So add a new viewport texture. The visibility viewport is the mask texture we're going to be using. And so you notice here it shows the same thing we had before, where it's let's see. All right, and so this texture, this shader already shows what it's going to show here. You can see in the viewport that it's already blocking off what we can't see based on the player's view. So what we do is we have a uniform sampler 2D, which is that's the viewport texture. This essentially just means here's another texture you can sample as you go through the pixels. And this one also has an update where we can mask with alpha versus just on or off. The way it's set up right now is it's either returning a pixel or discarding it. So with the mask with alpha false, we're just looking for if the mask has a value of greater than half. So if it's one of the light areas on that mask, then we discard that pixel. We discard that bit of the fragment. If mask with alpha is turned on, we essentially just set the alpha to the inverse of the color, so that we can do a faded out view. I can actually show that really quick by just switching this to mask with alpha. I will go to the point light that we set up for the lighting, and I'll switch this to a linear progression, you can see it, your visibility fades out. That could be what you want to go with, or I like the constant with this light. I'll just increase the size. So I'll go ahead and go back to the lit view shader and turn the mask with alpha turned off. And then if you play the game now, you can see, for example, you can see the light coming out of this door, but you can't see into this lit room anymore unless you actually go into the room. Same thing over here. You can see the light coming out of the door, but not into the room. And you can also see, here's the light, the shadow cast by this torch, and then here's the visibility part you can't see. In some cases, it might be nice to have a darkened view for the main screen, so you can do something like a fog of war. So what I'll go ahead and do is I'm going to duplicate this map one more time, bring it in here, and I actually need to turn off the material shader for this. There we go. All right, and then for this one, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to set a visibility, turn modulate to, I just usually have been using 20-20-20. It makes it dark enough to sort of see, but it hides, but it looks like it's in darkness. So then if I go play again, you notice you can see the rest of the map, but you can't see the lit areas until you're actually in the room. For this map, I would probably do something like build it up as you can actually raycast to see the different tiles, or something like that, so you can build up a fog of war map when you're done. That's how I set up the masking shader for lighting on in Godot 4 using shaders and tile maps. Thank you for watching, and I hope this is clearer than the previous video.